Hi. After my quitting CESS and my rejoining the Department of Geology, University of Kerala, there was an event that shook the minds of the geoscientists in India and ended up in instant termination of Professor C Karunakaran's services as the director of the Center for Earth Science Studies in Trivandrum came into force by a government decision. The immediate charge of the director CESS was taken over by the then Chief Secretary B. Ramachandran, himself a geology postgraduate, and MSc Geology from Madras University by research. This was actually a most unbecoming of any head of the institution in the state or probably in the country until that point in time. One of the reasons that led to this termination instantly from the director's job was a discovery that Professor C. Karunakaran had claimed traveling allowance and etc. for a trip he made from Trivandrum to New Delhi to attend a usual meeting in the Ministry of, Environment and Forests or whatever. And then from there, he went over to Dehradun by a taxi and there attended some meeting organized by the Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology. Well, when such meetings are taking place, one of the routine things will be that a clerk the organization will go and ask for, sir, you put your signature down here, this is your TA bill, and I want you a copy of the plane ticket, whatever. So every attendee will oblige to this so that at the conclusion of the meeting, all the eligible amounts are given away as a check. So what happened was, after receiving the expenditure check from the Delhi meeting, Karunakaran sir took a taxi or by some means he went to Dehradun. He would have taken a taxi or a car, or co-passenger in a car of another geoscientist who was attending the same meeting in the Wadia Institute. The Wadia Institute also, the clerk, did the same thing, and Karunakaran was asked to put his signature down over a revenue stamp, as it is called in India. And, this is something that is British days. And even now we are holding it very close to our chest. Unfortunately, it is high time that it is eliminated. Okay, anyway. And then Karunakaran sir apparently signed there also. In other words, ultimately what had happened was theoretically, Karunakaran had traveled twice to Delhi back to back, and as he has received his TA in the form of check. Then, in practice, what happened was Karunakaran sir went to Delhi, attended the meeting in the Delhi ministry, and then from there, traveled over to Dehradun, and in Dehradun he attended the meeting in the Wadia Institute, some official meeting anyway. Then he came back, flew back to Trivandrum. The flying back and forth was actually only once, for which 2 TA claims were made. And in fact, those days, when everything was through paper and pencil, such claims were very common. At least a good percentage of people who travel on account of government business used to claim, what is called traveling allowance, etc. For a trip in a mode which was not actually what was used for the travel. For example, you claim a first class TA and then you travel by third class or second class. So this was very common among government officials, and there was no chance of comparing the records or going back to such claims of any sort. Well, for some reason that was, people used to look away from, the auditor used to look away from such things. But in respect of Karunakaran's claim, somebody was very carefully watching this. And, being a veteran geologist, being a person who sat at the helm of Geological Survey of India at least for 3 years, and then he had a tenure in ONGC, came down to Kerala in the planning board, and then from there he created what is called a Center for Earth Science Studies. Such a mind, I think, will not be too keen about making an extra 2,000 rupees. But it was very carefully orchestrated by someone, by a caucus. I don't know who the members of the caucus are. But anyway, it happened. And it so happened, there was no action from Delhi. No, that is the most important point. This was pointed out to the government of Kerala. And, those days, secrets, such covert actions, activities, etc. were galore. If you wanted to trap someone, it is very simple and easy. It is very difficult, easy today, much more easier today than it was in the past. Anyway, one morning, I think in the August or September or thereabout in 82, there was a boxed item in the paper called daily newspaper called Kerala Kaumudi, that Karunakaran is replaced by, V. Ramachandran as director. Government has terminated instantly the services of Professor C. K. A man who created an institute for the state of Kerala and employed, I would say hand-picked people in service to serve in the institute, finally got the biggest slap ever on his face. Probably this was the hardest thing he ever faced in his life. And he had to leave Trivandrum in an ignominious manner. That is in 82, second half. And of course, for 2 or 3 weeks, this man, Chief Secretary Ramachandran, was the director, acting as the director. Then, of course, comes the turn of Harsha Gupta. Harsha in the earlier episode, I said that I took around Harsha Gupta to the suburbs of Trivandrum, like Kovalam and Neyyar Dam area, when he came for scouting the CESS on the invitation of the CESS, as well as on a formal offer of a job as deputy director. And I don't know, I don't want to fill up the blanks how it all happened, but it happened. Karunakaran was thrown out instantly. The saddest thing. But of course, there were some people who would always suspect. Karunakaran would have, claimed duty. Karunakaran is, when he was thrown out, he was probably 78 or 76. And what then happened was, Karunakaran very quietly, quickly got out of the Trivandrum scene, left Kerala and went and settled in Tamil Nadu, and finally died as a man who was after all these years of serving the country and living like a legend, he became a negative legend and vanished from the scene as a human being. I feel very sorry for that man, and I also have great regards for that soul, absolutely no doubt. Now, Harsh Gupta is a hand-picked person to be the deputy director of CESS of Karunakaran sir. Well, Harsh Gupta came. Harsh Gupta had all along been a very lucky man, I would say, because he was one of those guys who was in the right place at the right time with the right company. Well, Harsh Gupta then came to Trivandrum. He sat in the director's chair. And then, what is called the new campus, which was envisioned by the Karunakaran and days, and the sanction, approval, money, etc. were obtained from the state government. And then, of course, a campus was built in a place called Akulam in an abandoned China clay mine of those days. And still, it is the headquarters of CESS. So Harsha Gupta, like I said, is a man with who was in the right place at the right time. And he actually was then the violence says led the third Antarctic expedition, Indian Antarctic expedition. And then after one return from the third Antarctic expedition, what he did was he was promoted as a director, CESS. And then what happens, government was trying to fill planning to fill a post of a VC, Vice Chancellor in CUSAT. And of course, Vice Chancellor's posting is always very, not controversial, highly politicized appointment. And, when the forces are equally powerful in the choice of the excellent person, if a wiser administration would always go for a man who is not in the scene, who is not deliberated by the different political groups in the administration or in the government. So a wise selection to escape the criticism of the other partners of the coalition. The name of Harsh Gupta was suggested, and everybody sat quiet. Harsh Gupta went over to CUSAT, and then on and on. Okay, fine. Now, that is this much about the ignominious exit of Karunakaran and lucky entry of Harsh Gupta. So, now I will go back to whatever happened in the Department of Geology in the University of Kerala. On the first day of my joining, what I did was I gave a report of my joining there, and then also the letter that shows that I was relieved of my responsibilities in the Center for Earth Science Studies with effect from the 15th of June 1982. Then, of course, Aniruddhan was there, who met me in CESS and made a suggestion that he would want to work under my supervision for his PhD degree. So I sat down with Aniruddhan for several hours, for example, 6 to 7 hours on the first and the second day. And in the second day, we came up with a research proposal, an abstract of research proposal. Abstract of research, whatever it is, one of the things you'll have to, while registering for a PhD degree, you'll have to enclose. And there, we selected a topic which is very exciting those days. In other words, all the oil companies were in those days concerned with carbonate environment, carbonate primary porosity, carbonate secondary porosity, modern carbonate environments, ancient carbonate environments, so on and so forth. And all the support money for research came from oil companies. And then there was a smaller group who was working on what is called a framework mineralogy of arenes, as it is called, as an indicator or a signature of the climate of the provenance. In other words, look, I'm talking about 82, and there is a talk among this group of geologists about the climate factor, because the climate is getting added importance, not only the present day climate, even the past climate. Because, in geology, we have what is called uniformitarianism. The present is the key to the past. So, when you look at the past climate, you focus your attention on the rocks and from the framework minerals of the arenes, in other words, non-limestone rocks, shale rocks. And then you come up with some kind of signatures based on the framework mineralogy. What is framework mineralogy? Quartz, rock fragment, and feldspar. These are the three major components of any arenite. And once you have some kind of a picture of the composition, then it can be interpreted as a signature of the climate and the provenance that supplied these kind of detritus to the sedimentary basin. So, in fact, there is no such big sedimentary basin or great sedimentary basin in the state of Kerala. So I suggested Aniruddhan that, this is what people like Lee Suttner and Edwin Porter were doing. Why don't we look at something similar to this in the modern sediments? Well, then came the question of modern sediment. What is this modern sediment? I said only fluvial sediment. And they take a fluvial system and then look up how these, we know the climate in the provenance because it is a modern environment, and so how what is called the framework mineralogy evolved through transport and finally reached the positional basin, which is the ocean. Well, of course, we don't have to worry about what happened to this mineralogy in the ocean, but at least if we worried about the provenance and the river basin and river channel sediment in terms of the framework mineralogy, it will be a great addition to your research. So Aniruddhan got somewhat I should say, well, sir, if you suggest that, we will do this. So we wrote up what is called a research proposal or an abstract in hand and pencil, using paper and pencil, and for about 3 pages. We had some literature to cite, and we had also some why we, in other words, you have to say what is the problem, how are you going to do it, what would be the outcome. This is the sort of thing. And we chose for this study Dr. Aniruddhan's now, Professor Aniruddhan, our old days, Aniruddhan's research, the Bharatapuzha Basin. Bharatapuzha Basin has the advantage of, there are two, there is the Palakkad Gap, or Palakkad Gap. That is the area through which the Bharatapuzha river comes to the plains in Kerala. So it has, four tributaries, two coming from what is called the Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu area, and one is the Thudapura. Not Thudapura, I think the Kundapura from the Western Ghats, or the Kundapura is the Silent Valley region. We know that Silent Valley is in the tropical monsoon climate, so that is where it is set in. And also there is another coming from the southern flank of the not southern flank, but of the southern side of the left bank of Bharatapura. So finally, those all put together, and the third day it was typed up, and Andrew then filed for his registration beginning July of 1982. In other words, that there are two seasons where aspirants can register for PhD degrees. One is the July registration, and the other is the what is called the January registration. So, after the registration, there will be a doctoral committee to discuss what it is all about, and etc. They will make a recommendation that so and so be considered as a person qualified to undertake a PhD program under the supervision of so and so. So that is how, this episode I want to conclude with. We'll see with another one next time.